G'day everybody, it's just Martyn Iles here, whipping out my phone camera again really quickly because I want to bring some reflections to you all that I've been thinking upon in the past few days regarding the bad news out of South Australia. As many of you will know by now, South Australia has legislated abortion to birth, which is just unthinkable. It's the latest state in a whole range that have done that over the last few years. And that passed the Parliament, that legislation did. And look, it's tragic. We know that when this is legislated, we know that it happens a lot. We know that some of the babies are born alive and left to die. We know that they can feel the pain. We know all this terrible stuff. We know that abortion's very cruel to babies, and it's cruel to women as well who live with the consequences. But you know, the reason for this video is not to dwell on that. The reason for this video is twofold. I wanted to sort of come to you with some thoughts that I've had in the last few days about, why bad things happen and how we're to deal with that. But also to just remind us all that what we're doing is good, it's worthwhile, and it needs to continue, and that there is some hope in continuing. And I'm not just making that up. I really have something to say in that regard, which is quite exciting in one sense. But on that first point, there's no doubt we all hope for a better outcome. There was relentless work from so many South Australians. I went down there and was just blown away. 5,000 people showed up to the rally. There were so many who wrote to their MPs, who prayed, who visited their MPs, who called their MPs, and all sorts. It was an outpouring of concern like those MPs probably have never experienced in their careers. It was incredible. And we actually had the numbers for quite some time to ban late-term abortion in South Australia. So from the point of viability, which is 23 weeks, which would have been an Australian first. It would have been absolutely incredible if that had happened. But there were some tricky political games that were played right at the last minute. And as a result, that amendment to ban late-term abortion just barely failed, all because of last-minute political games, which is really sad. But the question is, why do bad things like that happen? And I've just jotted down some notes here because I've been reading Job lately, an unlikely source you might say, but really been encouraged by some things I've read in Job. The lesson of Job which hit me was this. It was that bad things happen to Job. Bad things happened to those who were connected with him, and they were very, very bad things. And they happened despite the fact that Job hadn't done anything wrong. They happened despite the fact that Job had done everything right. And he was left sort of asking the question, why in the world is this happening? But of course, for the reader, we get this little window at the beginning, and we see something that Job couldn't see. And we see that the reason it was happening wasn't necessarily in this world. The reason it was happening was outside of this world. The Apostle Paul uses that phrase, heavenly places. And there was something going on in the heavenly places for Job that he didn't know and he couldn't see. And the things that were happening were connected directly to that. And it's sometimes important that we just lift our eyes up a little bit and we say, do you know what? It's not all up to us. God hasn't lost control of the world. And we did what we were supposed to do. The good things that Job did still mattered. They were still right. He was still supposed to do them. But the outcome, was ultimately, it was in God's hands and it was on God's watch and God knew all about it. And I just want that reminder to really come home to us all, that we did what was right, we did what was good. We are called by Jesus himself to be a city that is set on a hill, that is seen, that can't be hidden, that is seen for shining light in dark places, that is seen for doing good works before others. That's what we did. And I want to say thank you to all the South Australians who stood up and did that. And you know what? The outcome was the outcome. But God hasn't lost control of the world. He hadn't lost control of the world in Job's time. And I think there's things going on today that we just don't fully understand. But it doesn't mean we shouldn't continue to do what's right. Now, that said, this brings me to my second point, which is that what happened actually was not all bad. These abortion to birth laws, they've spread all around the country. They went Victoria, then Queensland, then New South Wales, and then the South Australian one was the latest, also Tassie in there as well. But to have such a close vote in the South Australian Parliament on late-term abortion, with support from members of both the major parties, is totally unprecedented. It is totally extraordinary in all of the activism around this sort of thing. And not only that, but even though the bill is extremely bad, other amendments did succeed thanks purely to your activism because you spoke up so loudly and the politicians were so aware of you. And those amendments that did pass include a national first, which is a ban on sex selection abortion. So you can't abort a baby because it's a girl or a boy, but usually it's because it's a girl. Also, there was some softening of the provisions around doctors' conscience, very mild, but nonetheless some softening. There is in there a duty of care owed by doctors to babies born alive, which again is very unique in Australia. There's also the mandatory provision of counselling to women included in this bill, which again is very unique in Australia. There's also some limits on very late-term abortion, and it's quite complex, this section, but I just jotted down one thing here, which is so important, which is that one of the changes is that in the case of a late-term abortion, one of the things that needs to be considered is whether or not the woman is the victim of trafficking or sexual abuse. Now, that also is unique in Australia. And so even though this is a terrible bill, if I could put it this way, it's the best of a bad bunch, and people power made a difference. And here's the thing, and this is the point. The people power behind these changes, behind these campaigns, it's cumulative, it's incremental, it increases bit by bit. And politicians can ignore these activities as a once-off. They can even ignore them several times, but they cannot ignore outpourings of concern on this scale forever. We've been running some of the biggest campaigns ever in recent times on some of the issues lately, particularly in Victoria and South Australia, and the politicians' worlds have actually been rocked. You have been noticed, more than noticed. And the question that they want answered, the question that's occurring to them is, will this movement continue to grow or will it fizzle out? Because if it does continue to grow, then there is no question that the calculus of their decision making is going to have to change. There's no question that the public square for them and what they're encountering in terms of community concern has changed. We didn't get to this point where the premier of a state from apparently a conservative political party is supporting and championing abortion to birth. We didn't get here overnight. And we are not going to push back overnight either. This took years to get here. It's going to take time and commitment to push back. It's going to take cumulative action building on top of itself, and it's going to take incremental change. And that means we need the strength in numbers, as we've been demonstrating, and we need the commitment to do it again and again, even when we don't get everything that we want the first time. And I have to tell you, from my position, in sort of a bit of a driver's seat position, overlooking what's happening with this movement and what's happening with the people of God in Australia and what they're doing, I've got to tell you, things look unbelievably optimistic. I couldn't have imagined, actually, when I first took this job, that it would end up like this. We're on such a good pathway. And the increased pushback on these laws is proof that this movement is building. And it will continue to build. I'm confident of that, because we're going to keep building it up, and we are far from done. So I want to say thank you, like really thank you, to everyone who participated. It was quite extraordinary. I want to say thank you to South Australia. My goodness, you put your best foot forward. And there's, if we can sustain this, my goodness, change will come. Big changes will come. Good will be done, because righteousness will prevail, because righteousness will be demonstrated in the community so clearly. I also want to say thank you to MPs, and I've got a list here in front of me, which is why I'm looking at it. These MPs are the ones that actually voted to ban late-term abortion. And so if you hear the name of your MP mentioned in this list, I just want you to thank them. Get on the phone to their office or send them a message to say thank you for standing for life. From the Liberal Party, which is the party in government, you had Minister David Spears, the member for Black, Stefan Knoll, member for Schubert, Steve Murray, member for Davenport, Carolyn Power, member for Elder, Vince Tarzia, member for Hartley, Matthew Cowdery, member for Colton, Dan Cregan, member for Cavill, Dan Van Holst Pelican, member for Stewart, Adrian Pedrick, member for Hammond, Stephen Patterson, member for Morphett, and from Labor, from the opposition, you actually had the opposition leader, Peter Malinauskas, member for Croydon, Tom Katsantonis, member for West Torrens, Stefan Mulligan, member for Lee, Michael Brown, member for Playford, Andrea Michaels, member for Enfield, Tony Piccolo, member for Light, and from the Independents, you had Sam Dulac, the member for Waite, Jeff Brock, the member for Frome, Fraser Ellis, the member for Narunga, South Australia, I don't know them all by heart, Troy Bell, member for Mount Gambier. So if you heard your MP mentioned in that, thank them. Really, it'll make a huge difference to continue to thank them. But also, the other thing that'll make a huge difference is your continued voice for truth. Let's not grow weary in doing good. Let's continue to do what we are called to do. And yes, the outcome is in God's hands. But naturally speaking, the way that people are standing up lately, there's good down the track. I can see that. And what I say down the track, but I see this as a real increase, as a real step forward, where the people of the church and those who follow Christ are less silent than they have ever been. And we know that righteousness exalts a nation. And to shine that light of righteousness in the public square is what we've got to do. We've started to do it. We're not done. So let's look forward to good things ahead. And at the same time, trust God for the outcome. God bless you all. Thanks again.